You are now getting ready for bed. Donned in your sleep clothes, you are all comfy with your head nestled on a pillow. You are eager to have a good night's sleep. You may now turn off the light and let us begin our bedtime story. This story is fictional but based mostly from a historical account. The title of tonight's reading is A Twist of Fate. 3 men in royal adornment enter the great hall, past a majestic arch adorned with carvings of sphinx and mythical creatures. Beyond were imposing golden statues of wild beasts, lined up reaching the steps to a huge throne. Intricate designs were painted on walls and ceilings of the great passage, while pillars of marble and the mosaic-tiled floors, brimming with blues and whites, greens and crimson patterns, echo their feet stances as they paraded towards the monarch. The crowned being who was seated on his high-backed throne of gold, embedded with gems of every color, looked spectacular and fearsome in his royal ensemble. "The 3 presidents of your vast kingdom, your majesty," the chief attendant announced loudly, and was seconded by a trumpet blast. Daniel, son of a Hebrew from Judah, whose ranks rose as he served kings before the one he now stood in front of, was the most distinguished amongst all officials that lorded the provinces and cities of the great Medo-Persian Empire. He approached first, followed by the 2 other presidents of the land. The king urged, "Speak, my most trusted advisor, for I take regard of your excellent reports and recommendations. I am impressed by your recent proposal that would bring great benefit to our eastern colonies. I have granted them the provisions needed to get the work started, and I applaud your careful planning to hasten the construction of the roads and underground water passages so trades and businesses could flourish as they do here in Susa." The 2 other presidents from behind looked at each other. They tried to hide their vehemence over Daniel, for they regularly witnessed firsthand how the king always inclined himself towards their peer. Their jealousy afforded them to question, weren't they all equal in rank? After all 3 had given their reports, they were dismissed, but the 2 other governing officials secretly met with the other nobles, deputies, and satraps at the amphitheater at the foot of the Zagros Mountains to discuss ways to topple the man the king favored above them all. "Not even a local. How is he always looked upon by the king as if no fault could be found in him?" Tirsha, one of the satraps of a nearby province, sneered with disgust. His eyes bulged from his narrow frame of a face, and his crooked fingers shook as he raised them high to emphasize his point. "Exactly. Aren't we as wise as he is? I believe I and Babak are more capable than that Daniel." Azar, one of the 2 presidents present, who was as round as a boar, seethed and retorted in anger. "Then what must we do to rid the kingdom of this menace? He is faultless before Darius, and the only option is if we devise a plan to emanate from his complete allegiance to the law of his god." President Babak immediately barged in. He was a tall, solid figure with a voice deep and loud as his bearing. Inspired by those who ignited the meeting, each conniving elite within the panel argued, discussed, and bargained until the sun slid away and the skies turned dark. The winds blew fiercely upon the large assembly gathered in the open structure before they reached a conclusion as to what was to be done to Daniel. They all agreed he was a hindrance to their ambitions, but remarkably difficult to get rid of. The meeting culminated with a unanimous vote and then they all dispersed abruptly. The following day, they all sought to present their case before the unsuspecting king, and many attended the forum, except for a few absentees, and most especially the man they vowed to kick out of office for good. Lords and rulers from the highest to the lowest were represented. O King Darius, great ruler of our mighty empire, hear us as we speak. Your glory exceeds the mighty kings before you, and we pledge our allegiance to your rule and reign. Babak addressed with finesse. He had made sure to dress for the occasion too, and was arrayed in his finest robes and embellishments. He was meticulous with his appearance, to present a semblance of a dignified nobleman. Then speak, Babak, for such a crowd of my leaders merit my attention. The sovereign of the land bid to listen. O King Darius the greatest, you are most worthy of our full admiration and allegiance. We desire that everyone else in your kingdom be ever true to you. We have all concluded, and so as to propose to you now, that to test the loyalty of every subject under your command, a decree must be passed that every man, woman, and child of your glorious kingdom pay homage only to you. No one must pray or seek petition from any god but you. To you alone must all bow and pray to. Every being must prove completely and utterly submitted to your rule, your highness. The king cupped his hand on his chin, which held a chagrin, while his eyes glistened simultaneously, as he was obviously flattered by the speech he just heard. Sounds very appealing indeed, and wise, he agreed without hesitation, as he succumbed to his vanity. Then, O king, let 30 days be the duration of this test, and anyone who falls short of this edict, let him be thrown into the lion's den, for he deserves death. Treachery against you, O great one, must find no mercy. If you are agreeable to this, then may you put to action this law with your royal seal. Babak handed a newly inscribed scroll, and King Darius set his ring on a heated wax and stamped the royal crest on the written order. Daniel had been walking up and down the promenade while he interviewed the people to see where the government could still improve on. Everywhere along the paved walkway were already the emblems of the wealth of Persia. Bustling stores selling an abundance of goods, public halls and libraries, well-dressed citizens strutting with contented faces, and even beyond the streets, extending endlessly, were manicured lawns with marbled gazebos, statues carved from precious metals, and a great number of large palaces dotted the expanse as further evidence of the country's glory. He began to marvel and praise God for the peace and prosperity he witnessed within the boundaries of the empire he served. Suddenly, the sounds of horses' hooves jostled the bystanders, and the people on the streets made way immediately for the royal emissaries to pass through. A decree from the king went forth from the mounted messengers as they announced the new law with trumpet sounds. The crafty bunch gleamed with excitement, for they knew Daniel would be caught disobeying this edict. They had never seen him waver from his prayer routine that he performed 3 times a day. Eager to have the fellow eliminated as soon as possible, they observed as Daniel made his way home just upon hearing the king's order. Daniel was not the least disturbed. He had always been loyal and true. He knew, though Darius was a mighty ruler, the God of the universe whom he served was unrivaled in power and glory. Daniel opened his wooden shutters and turned his face toward the direction of Jerusalem, where the temple of God stood. He longed to tread upon the land of promise again, for now he could only simply imagine. Before him, vast meadows and vineyards lush with abundant crops were the sight he feasted on each day as he knelt. Today was no exemption. Always a reminder of Israel, the land chosen by his God as a chief among all nations. how it used to abound just like present Persia. It was a land rich with milk and honey. He bowed low in humble adoration and started to lift his soul in communion to his God as he pled for the return of his people to their homeland. Just then, soldiers fully armed barged into the Hebrew's home, toppling expensive vases and urns while they scrambled to arrest Daniel and to present him without delay to the king. As Daniel was brought before his master, he was accorded no mercy by the officials of the land and the soldiers that served under their leadership. Daniel's robe was tattered, his turban unraveled and in disarray over his head as they dragged him like a common criminal into the outer chamber of the royal court. Darius was greatly disturbed when he saw his favorite confidant brought to his presence because of the decree he had just signed. He realized the folly of the law he had consented to release and the conniving ways of his courtiers. He was deeply troubled by the realization that it was actually an intentional and pointed target that the recent law was concocted in the first place. But he could not exhaust any of his powers, for his seal had left no provision for amnesty. Once again, Babak spoke for his colleagues. Now here stands a culprit found in the act of disobeying your decree, your highness. The law must not be altered, for it is final and sealed by your own royal crest. This must be done as an example that no man should be above the law. At that moment, Daniel whispered a prayer. Dear God, you know how I have served you and the people with all my heart and have done no one harm. I am being persecuted right now just because I remain faithful to you. Please hold my hand as I commit all my tomorrows to you. May you protect me and cover me even so right now. A peace and calm permeated the accused as he felt the Almighty's response in his heart, taken from the precious scrolls of Deuteronomy. Know, Daniel, that the Lord your God is God. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for I, the Lord your God, goes with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Though King Darius searched for ways to prevent the looming fate of his trusted adviser and friend, he could not find a way to help Daniel. When the day was almost over, the king wept in deep sadness. Yet with a spring of hope he spoke, Your God whom you serve continually, may he deliver you, Daniel. The soldiers took hold of the man who had been stripped of his title and rank and pushed Daniel into the lion's lair. Then they rolled back the large stone at the mouth of the enclosure. The king then sealed the rock that locked the prison with his signet ring to mark the finality of the verdict against Daniel. Daniel faced the mighty beast as they prepared to pounce upon him. He looked up and prayed for grace and mercy. Then miraculously, each of the large golden lion knelt like puppies and licked on their mane instead. The den was more like a cave, cold and foreboding, but soon heaven's light shone, and translucent beings ministered to the wild animals, as well as to the only human being confined within those stone walls. Daniel bowed again and again, grateful to God for saving him, and then slept peacefully, unafraid of the lions that had been tamed by the unseen, as they all encircled round about him. At the palace, King Darius was unable to sleep. He fidgeted as he walked up and down his balcony. He fasted for the man he believed was actually the most loyal and wisest of all his men. He hoped fervently that Daniel's God would once again prove his might, as he did before when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Hebrew captives who also rose into power like Daniel, were thrown into the fiery furnace during Nebuchadnezzar's reign. They had all come out of a brimming oven unscathed. Many witnesses passed on the story that another being was seen to have been with them, and he had seemed to be the powerful protector of the mortals consigned in the furnace. If that were true indeed, then Daniel's God would also protect his loyal servant. The king arose early in the morning and ran in haste, leaving his sheets falling off the cobbled floors as he rushed to see if Daniel was still alive. "Daniel, has your God saved you?" he cried. "Indeed, my lord, my God has sent his angels' armies to shut the mouth of these lions, and here I am amidst their furs, for they have come to lie with me all through the night." Overjoyed, the king immediately had his men release Daniel from his prison and had his malicious officials and their families thrown in instead. They were all terrified and cried for mercy, but King Darius accorded them none. The moment they entered the cavern, the beasts pounced on them immediately. The roar of the hungry lions and the screams of their victims resonated eerily for a few minutes, and mercifully, it did not take long for silence to replace the tormenting sounds. "Great is Daniel's God!" Darius stood before his throne facing his new court. He held out his scepter and created a new decree to be enacted in all the languages in his dominion. He proclaimed, "Everyone must fear and tremble before Daniel's God. His kingdom will never be destroyed, nor shall it come to an end, for it is everlasting." And everyone that stood before the throne fell down on their knees, including the great king of the Medes and Persians, to pay homage to the unseen but sovereign of all the earth. We have now reached the end of our story. Good night and sleep tight.